Good morning and welcome. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar, Salt Lake City's Plan for Public Safety and Homelessness, What You Need to Know. I'm Heidi Walker, COO of the Salt Lake Chamber. Over the past 4 years, Utah has seen a 30% increase in homelessness, a challenge that affects the fabric of our community. This rising trend has prompted state leaders to call on Salt Lake City Mayor Aaron Mendenhall to develop a comprehensive plan that not only addresses these growing public safety challenges, but also provides meaningful solutions. Together, we'll explore how those efforts aim to create safer streets, stronger communities, and healthier futures for all Utahns. Your engagement today is vital because it is through our collaboration and information that we drive meaningful change. This is a priority of the Chamber. We're all about advocating for Utah's businesses and providing tools and insights to help you navigate complex policy issues. That's why we host these briefings, to keep you informed and empowered as we tackle challenges and opportunities ahead. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our moderator, Mary Catherine Perry, the Salt Lake Chamber's new Vice President of Public Policy and Government Affairs. For those who are not familiar, Mary Catherine is a seasoned policy expert and advocate that brings a wealth of experience and dedication to the Salt Lake Chamber by promoting policies that enhance the quality of life for all Utahns. As the former Director of Public Policy and Government Affairs for the Policy Project, she helped lead efforts like the Period Project and Teen Center Project. She also served as a policy analyst at the Utah Office of Legislative Research and General Counsel. Mary Catherine, take it away.
Thank you, Heidi. Hello, everyone. As Heidi mentioned, I'm Mary Catherine Perry. Thank you all for joining us for this critical discussion on homelessness and public safety in Utah. Today, we are fortunate to have an expert group of leaders who are deeply involved in shaping and implementing solutions on this issue. Representative Tyler Clancy, Andrew Johnston, Rachel Otto, and Randy Shumway will share insights into the collaborative strategies between the city and state, highlighting Mayor Mendenhall's new plan, legislative responses, and the recommendations of the Utah Homeless Services Board. And after each presentation, we will have a brief discussion. And one housekeeping item, the webinar is being recorded and will be available on the Salt Lake Chamber website later this afternoon. With that, let's get started. To start our discussion off today, we have Andrew Johnston, Director of Homeless Policy and Outreach for Salt Lake City, and Rachel Otto, Chief of Staff to Mayor Mendenhall, who will provide specifics to the mayor's new plan to address homelessness and public safety. Andrew and Rachel, the time is now yours.
Thank you so much, Mary Catherine, and thank you so much for having us and all of you for attending. I'm going to share my screen. We have a few slides to go through. Okay, is that good? All right. So I know we only have 10 minutes, so we're gonna kind of fly through what is actually a pretty weighty plan, and hopefully give you a couple of the highlights of what the city has tried to put together here. So first of all, I think as most of you probably know, we received this invitation from Governor Cox, Speaker Schultz, and President Adams in mid-December, requesting that we put together a comprehensive plan that explains the system of public safety and in Salt Lake City, and identifies the gaps in the system that are preventing us from ensuring that all of our public spaces feel safe and welcoming. So we quickly gathered our city team and attacked this project in pretty short order. Just a little bit about the methodology. We have, of course, relied on a lot of our county and state service provider partners in putting together this information. You know, much of it is out there. Salt Lake County in particular has done amazing work in trying to map the system over the last few years and identifying where some of these gaps are. So we did a lot of first-person interviews. So we interviewed around 50 leaders in the business community, in the legislature, residents, people with lived experience, and policymakers to get their sense of how things are, what they'd like to see from Salt Lake City. We also opened a survey to our frontline workers, so our police officers, our firefighters, our parks workers, our social workers, so that they could also contribute to the discussion, identify solutions, and tell us, where they saw the gaps. So I threw up on the screen here the guiding principles that we formulated at the beginning of this process. And what our decision-making in Salt Lake City is guided on is that everyone should be treated with dignity and everyone should have access to these basic services. Our public spaces should be safe and welcoming to everyone. We will hold people accountable for their actions. We will be held accountable for our actions that are the pieces of the system that we control, and we will clearly identify and be collaborative with other partners on the parts of the system that they control. So in all, the plan includes 23 recommendations for different parts of the system, whether that's the county, state, service providers, others, and 27 specific actions that Salt Lake City will take in the short, mid, and long term. So we're going to talk through a couple of the highlights of the plan that Salt Lake City is most directly going to be implementing. And I'm going to hand it over to Andrew Johnston. But just as a quick overview, we mapped out the plan, and this is I pulled some screenshots from the plan, and at the end, I'll throw the link on the screen. But we mapped the system under what is called the sequential intercept model. So this kind of tracks someone's experience from being in the community, potentially needing services, and being diverted through the criminal justice system through various points, through various intercepts. So the city's role is really focused on the community piece and the law enforcement piece. So those are the recommendations and actions we'll share with you today. Andrew?
I know this visual is a little small. If you get the actual report, this is an example of what you'll see throughout the report. Flow charts to understand how the system currently works and the different elements of it. The community prevention side is really a lot about housing, shelter, and services. Drug and alcohol treatment, mental health treatment, those kind of interventions that can prevent folks from falling into homelessness, or also in some cases prevent some illegal activities at times. The big takeaway, I guess, next slide, is that we know there's a deficit of affordable housing or housing across the board. The further down the income level you go, the more acute the problem is. And so at the bottom, with deeply affordable and permanent supportive housing, there's just a huge deficit we've got. So things that the city can do are help the Other Side Village, which is currently completing its phase one of its project on the west side of the city. They hope to have 60 of their units, that first phase, done this summer. And then they'd like to scale up with the remaining 200 plus units as soon as possible. So we want to facilitate that as much as we can. We've done tens of millions of dollars in deeply affordable housing over the years that Mayor Mendenhall has been in office, and we're going to continue that this year with at least $5 million in next fiscal year to keep contributing to that in the city itself. And then we have to look at statewide about opportunities. One of the big problems we've got is not just folks who are experiencing homelessness who have no place to live, or after shelter stays go into housing. There's a lack of that. It's also folks who actually are released from the jail who complete their time or released on probation and parole from prison. They don't have places to go oftentimes. And so one of the big issues is where do folks go? Probably the most acute way to sort of explain this is Salt Lake County has a pretty good behavioral health treatment program system, substance use treatment and mental health treatment. From their mental health treatment side and residential treatment, they can't release people very quickly. They wanted people to stay less than 120 days in those treatment options and move on. It's double that or triple that for most people. They can't leave because there's no place to go. This housing would be a huge step towards helping open up more treatment beds, get more people into treatment and flowing through, and stabilizing an outpatient treatment on the other end. So it's not just about folks on the street you see who are experiencing homelessness. It's about the whole system working better. The next slide. We'll talk about, because housing takes a while, and we all know that. We've dug ourselves a big hole here we need to dig out over time. One of the things that can happen more quickly is shelter, emergency shelter. And so We know that the state is looking at establishing a campus of at least 1,000 to 1,200 beds, if not more, in one location. It'll likely be fairly close to Salt Lake City, if not in the city limits someplace. That's a huge step, but it might take a year to 2 years. It's possible that that could be the time frame. And we really need something more quickly than that. We've been waiting several years now, and we just can't wait much longer. So Mayor Mendenhall has proposed using some city land temporarily to get an interim plan in place, get shelter beds for the next 2 years, say, until the campus is developed, and move that along more quickly. And then we need funding. We need funding for operations statewide, but also for a new campus or the shelters themselves. And we also need the whole state to sort of have access to these services. If it's only in Salt Lake County or Salt Lake City, the whole region may flow here if they don't have services elsewhere. And that's logical. I get it. What we don't want to have happen is that just always happens, where it just accumulates and accumulates. And we need more options across the state. So we're asking the state to look at every county, multiple places in the state to have these services they don't have currently, and to really allow people who are experiencing homelessness or mental illness or problems in their own community to stay in their own community and stabilize.
Thanks, Andrew. So the next step in the sequential intercept model is the law enforcement piece. And you can see here how we've mapped out each section of the sequential intercept. So this is obviously something that if you're interested, you can dive into in the plan itself. But in the law enforcement arena, we have a couple of big immediate actions. And the two biggest are that the Salt Lake City PD, as of not this past Sunday, but the Sunday before, has reorganized a couple of their functions into the Community Impact Division. And what you'll see is more foot patrols downtown. You'll see more bike squads downtown, also in some of our high traffic problem areas, such as the Jordan River Trail and the ballpark area. And these will be officers who are out on the beat, making contact with businesses, forming relationships with residents, and also just being present, being visible, and deterring crime. This will be a more flexible force. So we've had 3 bike squads under different commanders for different areas of the city. Those have all been consolidated under one commander, Commander Derek Diamond, who I'm sure many of you already know. But he will have the ability to, of course, look at the data, look at calls for service, look at issues that are popping up in the community, and be able to direct these resources quickly and more often. The second big action is that we are deploying our violent criminal apprehension team to aggressively target gang activity, drugs, and guns. And this is combining our special investigations unit and our gang unit. And these will be 20 dedicated officers that will be really targeted into the gangs, drugs, and guns. They've done some really amazing work right now. And with the relationships that we have with the DEA and our other federal partners, it gives us access to resources that we may not have at the county jail, and a little bit more nimbleness and ability to target these, what are really big quality of life issues in the city. You can also dive into this in the plan, but this explains the formation of the Community Impact Division. And we're in the process of finalizing a public-facing dashboard where we'll be tracking metrics. You will be able to log in, be able to see what work has the Community Impact Division and the PD done in these areas. How many hours have we been out doing bike patrol, doing foot patrol? What are the crime statistics? What are the arrest, citations, community efforts, or community engagement efforts? You'll be able to see all of that, and we'll be able to track progress and report back to our stakeholders regularly. So a couple of other midterm actions that I won't spend time on because I know we're running a bit short, but we will be exploring growing the department. We have grown the department over the last few years, but our calls for service continue to increase. Our proactive policing efforts have increased over 65% over the last few years. And we, may need to look at growing the department to be able to keep pace and to keep doing that proactive work. We're deploying public safety cameras to deter crime in high traffic areas. And we're also developing an integrated park security camera program at some of our high volume parks and public squares around the city. So there are a lot of other actions and recommendations, but because we are short on time, I will skip to this. I think the high level, most important thing to know about our plan is that this is not an a la carte menu. So none of these actions will work, whether it's PD or shelter or any of the other things that the city has some direct control over. None of those things will work unless the entire system can grow, flex, and change to accommodate, more people, higher need for services, all of the things that we've been seeing over the last decade or so in terms of how the system is functioning and not functioning. So the entire plan is there in that link, and you can probably just go to the slc.gov website and Google it from there in the search bar. But please let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel and Andrew. We do have just a few follow-up questions for you. The interim shelter that you talked about, why is that so important to this plan? And maybe even give us a time frame. You said the larger campus is a few years off, but tell us just a little bit more about this interim shelter.
Yeah, so the campus has been envisioned at the state level of being massive. We're talking about, say, 1,200 beds, which would be 3 times the size of any other shelter in the state. So it's large and a lot of services attached to it. So it's a big undertaking. It's expensive. It needs 30 plus acres of land potentially. You can see why it's been hard to sort of site this. The interim plan would be probably something that's slightly smaller as far as footprint, but city-owned property. We would hope that through our own city processes and other things to get it up within months and not years. And it's so important because there's just no outlet for any of these systems to work. Whether it's the criminal justice system, the jail, whether it's the treatment providers, whether it's the shelters and the street outreach teams. For an outreach team to go out and engage with somebody who's on the street experiencing homelessness and offer services, but say, I really have no place to take you because all the current shelters are full, it doesn't make outreach very effective. When the jail releases somebody, they're releasing them literally to the street in South Salt Lake if there's no place to go. And a treatment provider may hold on to somebody longer just because they can't go anywhere. They can't rely to have them having a bed someplace, get their medications consistently, have a stable, safe location to be so symptoms can stay sort of down. That's why the shelter is so critical to all these systems now. It's not a fix for everything, but it buys us some more help in the meantime while the bigger systems get moving better.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. And then the last question, what can the business community do to help this plan work?
Thanks for that question. We have always appreciated the support of the business community and the relationships that we have, direct relationships with PD and throughout the government structure. But I think what the business community can do to help is to advocate for the legislative needs in the plan and some state participation and funding that we know are needed to make this system work. And again, this is not an a la carte menu. We need things, we need additional things in every part of the sequential intercept, and advocating for that complete package as opposed to, maybe focusing only on what is right in front of us in terms of a public safety issue is I think maybe the most important thing.
Perfect. Thank you, Rachel and Andrew. We appreciate your participation and presenting that to us today. Next, we have Representative Tyler Clancy of House District 60, who will provide insight into the legislative response to the new plan and any preparations to support Salt Lake City's efforts. Representative Clancy, the time is now yours.
Well, thank you so much, Mary Catherine, and thank you, Andrew and Rachel, for the great presentation. And as they mentioned, it was really just the highlights because it is a fully scoped plan, over 50 pages. So, excuse me. We have been, I think it's fair to say, we've been in constant collaboration with the city on making sure that we can implement this program, and I'm sure there'll be some refinements and input from the state government and working with the city together. You know, it was framed in the news as quite a adversarial letter and relationship. And while certainly municipal leaders and state leaders don't always agree on everything, I think there's been a crest in the energy around this issue, which has led to some really productive conversations. I'll talk a little bit about what the state is hoping to specifically help with. And if you look at the plan that the mayor released, there are specific requests made of the state. So one of them that is, I would say, tangential to homelessness is this challenge of repeat offenders in the community. Salt Lake City Police Department released data of their top 10 individuals who had the most arrests from January to December. And Mary Catherine, I could get you that information if that's something you're interested in looking at. But the number one individual on there was a 28-year-old male who had been arrested and cited over 30 times from January to December. Every single time that he was arrested, he either was released on with no bail, or he was released for overcrowding. Many times, someone like that, who we can all recognize is engaged in criminal conduct, they will present as homeless because they have burned all their bridges and they've lost their relationships and certainly housing and other opportunities for meaningful engagement in the community. I think left, right, and center, we can all agree that if someone's going out and they're getting arrested 32 times, that means they probably committed more than 30 times, more than 30 crimes in the community before they were arrested. That's unacceptable to everyone. That's unacceptable to the community members who have had to be subjected to those crimes and that type of disorder. And it's also unacceptable to that individual who clearly needs some serious intervention in their life to help make some changes. So that is one piece. So what can we do with jail capacity? What can we look at with bail for repeat offenders who really are being a menace to the community? The second is helping with public safety in general, looking at what is the resource situation? How can we support the efforts in the downtown area that's already being done, already being worked on by the Salt Lake City Police Department? And then I think you'll continue to see a push for outcome-driven homeless services. And the idea that we ought to base our success on outcomes and not just on inputs. As we talk to business leaders across the state, that is something that is really important, that we want to make sure that what we're doing, and as we continue to invest more resources into these complex issues, that we are expecting outcomes, we're expecting results. Last year with one of the chamber's priority bills, House Bill 298, we were able to set that in motion, and it should be up and running next week to look at system flow, see how are people moving through the system. I'll just give you a really brief example because I know your membership, Mary Catherine, are already very familiar with these concepts, but we want to be able to measure different types of homelessness and how they flow through the system. So I'll give you an example. If there is a mother with her 2 children fleeing domestic violence who enter homeless services, where do they go? Are they going to go to get a rapid rehousing opportunity? Are they going to stay in one of the homeless resource centers? Are they going to be moved to maybe a hotel with a voucher or something? And how long are they in the system until they exit? Similarly, we can look at someone who we might consider to be chronically homeless and map their path and the amount of time that they stay in homeless services before they either exit or re-enter. We are not saying that it's going to be a one-size-fits-all approach. What we're saying is that if we're going to invest resources and we're going to ask the citizens of Utah, the taxpayers, to invest resources, but also our philanthropic consortium to invest resources. We want to be targeted about what population are we trying to serve, what outcomes are we hoping to see. And that is just every time we talk about funding, that's always going to be part of the table, is what is that accountability. Last two things I'll talk about is looking at ongoing funding sources. Representative Elison is working really hard right now to see some creative opportunities where we might be able to put the funding in place that we need for operating expenses and for these different resources. That's really important to look at from the state, to make sure that our service providers know that the state can be counted on to provide those important resources. Last thing I'll say is we have had conversations with our federal partners about rescinding some policy mandates from the Department of Housing and Urban Development. There's a policy known as Housing First that stipulates that any federal funding that comes from the Department of Housing and Urban Development has very strict guidelines about how it can be spent. Some of those guidelines are great, and for some people, Housing First certainly works, but it doesn't serve everyone. And so what we're hoping for is to petition our federal partners to give Utah more flexibility, to allow our experts on the ground to innovate, to look beyond one-size-fits-all solutions. And some of the things that you've seen in the plan, kind of the stratification, if you will, of different interventions, whether it's sober living or congregate shelter, non-congregate shelter. We want to make sure that we're not fighting ourselves on this issue. And so we're looking at how can we get that support for innovation and flexibility with our federal partners. So that's just a brief overview. It's certainly going to start picking up soon. And I can tell you that we've been in constant conversation with municipal leaders, county leaders across the state, and this is something that everyone's really engaged on.
Thank you so much, Representative, for giving us that overview too. You just mentioned municipalities and counties across the state. You're from Provo, not the capital city. So tell us, what does this look like statewide? Will these metrics be shared across the state when you're looking at outcomes? Is this only Salt Lake City, or are you looking at this statewide?
Yeah, this is really, President Wayne Niederhauser, who is the Director of Office Homeless Services, has outlined, a guiding principle that we need to be able to solve homelessness where it begins. There's complex reasons why people would go different places. Certainly a place where if you set up a tent for unsheltered camping and you're immediately interdicted by law enforcement and you're not able to set up a more long-term camp, certainly you're going to move to a place where it's easier to engage in unsanctioned camping. But nonetheless, there are individuals who, whether it's something from an eviction standpoint or a domestic violence standpoint or a drug addiction or a mental health issue, all of those things exist in every city and every county within the state. So the idea of these accountability metrics do not apply to one city or one county. This would be a statewide metric, really based on the pathway to human thriving that the Utah Homeless Services Board unanimously adopted earlier this year, making sure that we all have a shared vision of what success looks like so we can measure ourselves and hold ourselves accountable.
Okay, great. Thank you. So how, from the state perspective, as a member of our legislature, how will you know that this is successful in the short, mid, and long term as you partner with the city going forward?
Well, sure. I think there's a couple of different ways you could look at it. And we could talk about, I'll say, the Salt Lake City public safety challenges that we've been working on, and then also statewide in terms of homelessness. The first for downtown public safety is data and graphs. They certainly are important. They certainly share a story, but we know, and your members know, that all it takes is one experience. All it takes is one negative experience of feeling unsafe. That's not acceptable. We know that while open air drug scenes, if you look at it as a snapshot, maybe the crimes in and of itself, whether it's drug possession, public drug use, public urination, public intoxication, unsanctioned camping. All of these things in and of itself may not rise to the level of a serious crime. However, when we do not interdict or intervene in these open air drug scenes, we know that it's going to metastasize. And we know that we see violence, chaos, and disorder spur from those situations. And so I think the most self-evident part will be the closure of, you should be able to drive through the capital city and not see people smoking fentanyl out in the open or injecting methamphetamine. That should be the standard that we look for can we see the kind of chaos and disorder that many cities across the country have seen? And I think that this plan gets to the heart of that. But also, too, we are going to make sure that the resources are there necessary to make that happen. On the second end, I'll just lean on one of our actual attendees I saw on the panel here. Is Mo Egan says in his outreach efforts with the Other Side Village, we will meet you where you are, but we love you too much to let you stay there. That's really the mission statement for what I think the Utah Homeless Services Board has told us as the state government with the adoption of the Pathway to Human Thriving. And I think if you look at that document, if anyone's interested, that's what I would look at if you're really interested to see where the state's going. It is not just an idea. It's not a pie in the sky. There are clear, measurable outcomes that we can hold ourselves to, and that I think is expected of us when we spend taxpayer money or it's the philanthropic funds. So I hope that's helpful, and happy to answer any questions as it goes on.
Thank you, Representative. And one last question, we're asking each of our panelists this: what can the business community do to help this plan be successful?
Great question. Last year with House Bill 298, when the chamber made it a priority support, it signaled to a lot of our legislative leadership that this was a mission critical issue. I think that the chamber and your membership have a very unique voice as individuals who have invested in their communities, both with money and obviously enterprise, but also with heart and soul. You're members of the chamber. It's not an accident to start a successful business. It is blood, sweat, and tears. And so when folks like that, who are so deeply engaged in the community, look at different pieces of policy and say, this is what we're hoping for. We've put in the work to our businesses, we've put in the work to our community, and this is what we're expecting the state to make sure they're holding themselves accountable to. Those are the kind of messages that really resonate with our legislature.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us, Representative Clancy. Good luck through the rest of this session, and we appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you, Mary Catherine.
Thank you. Closing our webinar, we have Randy Shumway, founder and CEO of the Cicero Group and chair of the Utah Homeless Services Board, who will share the recommendations from the board on addressing statewide homelessness. Randy, the time is now yours.
Thank you, Mary Catherine. Mary Catherine, you'll appreciate that I'm sitting in your husband's office because I'm at a meeting up at the University of Utah. So I meant to push the picture over so that everybody could see my beautiful family behind me. With that said, 6 months ago, the state homeless board, the state homeless governing board began. There's 11 members on this board, and we have been working tirelessly in order to think systemically about what is necessary to come to the rescue of a vulnerable population. Members of the chamber are well represented. Myself and Spencer Eccles serve on the 4-person executive committee. Ryan Beck, who's a business leader in the city, serves on the homeless board. And the first thing we did was we took a step back and said we need to redefine what is success. And with absolute unanimity across, and the 11-person board represents broad perspectives and experiences across the state. And with absolute unanimity, we approved that moving forward, we will no longer be in the business of mere food and shelter. We are in the business of improving human lives, and therefore the North Star is human dignity. As Tyler Clancy quoted Mo Egan, we'll meet you where you're at, but we love you too much to leave you there. We are going to be in the business of helping people make progress towards increased human dignity. That means that we're going to inculcate a degree of expectations that as we bring services to support individuals, we want them to embrace those, and we want them to capitalize on the opportunities to create new and better opportunities for themselves. With unanimity, we defined, and we're the first state in the union to do this, a pathway to human thriving framework. It's across 7 categories: mental and behavioral health, substance use disorder, employment, stable housing, public safety, physical health, and social relationships, and create a plan in which we help people migrate from struggling to stable to thriving. The philanthropic and business community has invested in a pilot program called Know by Name. The idea of Know by Name is that we're able to amalgamate information from disparate databases with the permission of the individual that we're supporting, so that a police officer, when they arrive to somebody having a manic situation, rather than arresting them, they'll know who the individual's caseworker is, what medication they might not have access to that they desperately need in order to help them in their situation. With the Know by Name system, every individual is attached to a dedicated clinical behavioral health specialist and has an individualized care plan committed to helping them make improvements. We're reallocating the funding in order to help people make progress throughout the system. And I would say that we are joining arms with the vast majority of people within the system who have said, the way we have done it for 2 decades, very, very well intentioned, but not generating the outcomes for our vulnerable population that they so desperately need. And so that we've got to be humble enough to rethink the approaches that we're taking, and be much more focused on the types of results that not only benefit society, but most importantly, benefit these individuals and their loved ones. We are also in the process of thinking differently about our facilities. We have a proposal right now for a transformative, centralized campus that can provide low barrier shelter, but provide access to so many of the services individuals need in a centralized location in order to start helping them make improved progress. That will allow us to transition our transitional housing units to be what they were intended to be, our resource centers, and that is to help individuals reintegrate into the community. Similar with our permanent supportive housing, getting once a person has become stable, getting them the wraparound services that help them move to the next stage. So I believe we're seeing, again, you've seen across the disparate perspectives and experiences and representing different entities, unanimity across the homeless board on these concepts and these efforts, and we're seeing a lot of consensus building around it throughout the state. I'll also say that there's not a day where I am not receiving a phone call from another state that's saying, we're hearing about all the great things that are occurring in Utah. Tell us what you're doing, and can we plagiarize? San Francisco 2 weeks ago came out with their Streets to Stability plan, which heavily plagiarized off of the Utah model. It's because of the collaboration, the evidence-driven approach that is unique here to the state, that I think is getting us to the levels that we're achieving at this stage.
Thank you, Randy. I have just a few follow-up questions. You talked about other states. How are the states' newly adopted guiding principles different from how we in other states have approached homelessness?
Mary Catherine, I'm going to sound like a nerd when I talk about this, but we have historically taken a housing first approach. We're taking a human first approach. So the concept, very, very well intentioned, that has been developed over the last 2 decades is let's look at our most vulnerable population, and the key to success is to get them in stable housing. The problem is that oftentimes you'll get them into stable housing without having addressed the root difficulties of mental and behavioral health disabilities, substance use disorder, habituation, and things of that nature. And so what we're embracing is a belief that we have got to address the root challenges that are facing individuals, bring the resources and the expectations to bear that that will help them improve, and believe in them that they can make changes. I don't think there's anything more demoralizing than looking a person in the eye who has lost all hope as they have stumbled again and again and again, and they don't believe in themselves. They've lost their confidence, and us looking in them in the eye and saying, yeah, I've lost all confidence in you too. So I'm going to have no expectations in you. George W. Bush called it the soft bigotry of low expectations. We're embracing a new approach, and that approach is I believe in you. I know you've lost hope. I'm going to bring the resources to bear to help you, but I'm also going to bring the expectations to bear to say there's accountability wrapped into this, and we're going to help you make progress along this pathway to human thriving. It's a very Utah-esque attitude of we're going to invest, but we're going to be deeply committed to helping you make progress, to help you achieve that dignity that is inherent in each and every one of us.
Thank you. So explain to me too, and all of us, why is there the emphasis that we're seeing on the Salt Lake City law enforcement? And does this risk criminalizing homelessness?
Yeah, I think it does the exact opposite. I think it comes to the rescue of those who are being preyed upon. When an individual goes to the streets, it is because of trauma. And if they stay on the streets for even a very short period of time, and we have seen this again and again and again, they have been physically assaulted, they have been repeatedly raped, and they have been filled with such poisonous toxins that many of them don't know their own names. They're not able to make decisions that are in their best interest, and really bad actors are preying on those vulnerabilities. So whatever trauma was so great that it drove them to the streets in the first place, it's severely exacerbated because of the degree to which they are being preyed upon. So I believe I don't want to call it law enforcement. I want to call it public safety. That's a message that's been embraced by our Mayor Mendenhall. I have so appreciated her leadership on this topic the last 6 to 8 weeks. It's not just her leadership, but her attitude to say, what's occurred is not working. Let's bring everybody to the table, learn from each other, and let's create a model that focuses on public safety. Law enforcement is just one component of that. So your question, will it criminalize homelessness? I think it will do the exact opposite. I think the mayor's plan and her bold leadership is focused on coming to the rescue of people that are being preyed upon because of their vulnerabilities. And I applaud her for that leadership.
Great, thank you. Randy, and one last question. What can each of us do? What can the business community, but what can each of us do to help?
Well, a couple of ideas. Number one, the business community is well represented at the Utah Impact Partnership. This is a number of philanthropists and business leaders that have come together and said, we're going to pull our resources and our best thinking in order to be the tail that wags the dog. We're going to lead out on this issue and ensure that we are providing the incentives and the accountability to help our service providers work collaboratively with one another and each be actively engaged in assisting individuals make progress along this pathway to human thriving. So number one, participate in the Utah Impact Partnership. It represents each of you extraordinarily well. It's led by Clark Ivory. It was founded by Clark Ivory and Gail Miller, and has just had an outsized impact in affecting change throughout the state for our homeless population. The second is the chamber plays such a critical role. Every time I'm on the Hill, I will hear legislators say, where is the chamber on this? What does the business community saying? And I would say the degree to which we speak with one unified voice really is critical. Sometimes we're viewed as advocating merely the economic interests, but I believe that a rising tide lifts all boats, and that what we are doing for the individual is extraordinarily positive for society, is extraordinarily positive for economic opportunity and economic and social mobility for everybody within the state. So I think these are topics that resonate with each of us. And so the two things I would say is participate with the Utah Impact Partnership, and two, work closely through the Chamber of Commerce as a united front in the advocacy of what we're doing. Some of the things we're doing are going to require some immediate short-term investments. I believe that we are fixing the system in such a way that we are that we are working so much more efficiently in helping people make progress, that we are that in aggregate we're going to bring much more effective services at a lower cost over the long run. But the shift that we're making is going to require some immediate short-term investments. And so the degree to which we can understand those and support those, I think, is beneficial as well. Thank you for asking. That's a great question.
Great. Thank you so much, Randy, for joining us. And thank you once again to our leaders for their participation today. We appreciate your insight. I'd also like to thank everyone who joined us today and those who submitted questions in advance. We appreciate your engagement as we collectively work on addressing this issue together. As a reminder, this webinar was recorded and will be available on the Chamber's website this afternoon. Have a wonderful day.